Hello, Magic players and collectors. Welcome back to the Land Library. I'm your librarian, and in this episode of latest Loadout, I'm going over Tarkir Dragonstorm. This is a standard set released on April 11th of 2025, and is themed around, surprise, surprise, dragons. Although there's a little bit more to it than just quote-unquote dragons, the set takes place on Tarkir and is all about the fight between the clans and the dragons coming from the Dragonstorms on Tarkir, since the Dragonstorms have become very uncontrolled and wild after Ugin left the plane. And as you'll see, the lands in this set are thus very filled with dragons and clans. Like always, first up is the basics, with a pretty typical 2 regular prints for each, and a full art version. These ones in particular have like a shadow of a dragon passing overhead. These are pretty neat and pretty on theme, but they're not quite as on theme as the next set of basics, because in collector packs exclusively, there are Dragon Eye basics. These look super cool. They've got like a dragon eye with the mana symbol in their pupils. They don't really seem that related to land, but sometimes you get creative basics. And while not actually part of the set, so unfortunately not being brought back into standard, Wastes even got a dragon eye full art in the form of a promo card. It's pretty rare to see Wastes included, even though it still kind of isn't because it's not actually part of the set. But you know what isn't rare to see included? The life gains. These are back literally after just being in the last set, even with new art in Aether Drift, with new art again. These, of course, come in tapped and give you 1 life when played, and you can tap for either of their colors because they're dual colors. These include Bloodfell Caves, Blossoming Sands, Dismal Backwater, Jungle Hollow, Rugged Highlands, Scoured Barrens, Swiftwater Cliffs, Thornwood Falls, Tranquil Cove, and Windscarred Crag. And despite their prevalence of being reprinted, it still is nice to see new art on these cards. But that's not the only dual colors making an appearance, because the enemy-colored fetch lands are coming in hot with brand new special guest prints. This is the first time we've had a cycle of lands get special guest prints. Previously, it's only been individual cards, so that's pretty cool, and also massively boosts the amount of lands with special guests. But not only that, they made a second set of these same fetch lands with different special guest art in collector packs exclusively. These also have a super cool dragon scale foiling, which I don't really have a good visual for. Maybe just look it up. But they look awesome. And I'm sure everyone watching my channel knows what fetch lands do, but I'll go over them anyway. These lands, you pay 1 life to tap and sack to search your library for a land with the corresponding basic land types and put them in play. These include Arid Mesa, Marsh Flats, Misty Rainforest, Scalding Tarn, and Verdant Catacombs. And a different fetch land, Evolving Wilds, is also making an appearance with new art. Just regular art for this one, though. Evolving Wilds is just a wildcard fetch land that tap and sacks to search for any basic and put it in play tapped. Now on to a cycle of tricolors, the wedge-colored pure tap lands. These are tricolors that come in tapped, and that's it. These were originally printed in Khans of Tarkir to be lands corresponding to each clan, so it's not really any surprise to see them return in this Return to the Plane, but they're rocking great new art. These include Frontier Bivouac, Mystic Monastery, Nomad Outpost, Opulent Palace, and Sandstep Citadel. Moving out of the main set and over to the Commander set, there's a couple of returning lands with new art, the first of which is Command Tower. This land can tap for a mana of any color in your commander's color identity, and, it's Command Tower. It gets reprinted a lot, it has new art, that's cool, but it's not really surprising. But the other one, Temple of the Dragon Queen, is pretty surprising. This is the first reprint of this land ever, having just been printed in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, aka the D&D set. Temple of the Dragon Queen is a very fitting land for this set, though, because it enters tapped unless you control a dragon or reveal a dragon from your hand, and then it chooses any color and locks into that color, and then can tap for that color. This land goes really well in multicolor dragon decks, which just so happens to be kind of the whole theme of this set. Which just leaves us with the rapid fire section. So we've got Access Tunnel, Adakar Wastes, Ash Barrens, Battlefield Forge, Bojuka Bog, Bountiful Landscape, Canopy Vista, Kenyan Slough, Cascade Bluffs, Castle Arvindale, Castle Embereth, Caves of Koilos, Cephalid Coliseum, Cinder Glade, Clifftop Retreat, Command Beacon, Contaminated Aquifer, Crypt of Agadim, Darkwater Catacombs, Deceptive Landscape, Dragonskull Summit, Dreamroot Cascade, Drownyard Temple, Exotic Orchard, Ferris Lake, Fetid Heath, Fetid Pools, Flooded Grove, Foreboding Landscape, Fortified Village, Glacial Fortress, Golgari Rot Farm, Haunted Mire, Haven of the Spirit Dragon, Hinterland Harbor, Irrigated Farmland, Isolated Chapel, Kerpulson Forest, Kessig Wolf Run, Llanowar Wastes, Memorial to Folly, Mossfire Valley, Mosswort Bridge, Myriad Landscape, Overgrown Farmland, Path of Ancestry, Perilous Landscape, Prairie Stream, Radiant Grove, Reliquary Tower, Rockfell Vale, Rootbound Crag, Rugged Prairie, Shattered Landscape, Shattered Sanctum, Sheltered Thicket, Shivan Reef, Skycloud Expanse, Smoldering March, Sulphur Falls, Sungrass Prairie, Sunken Hollow, Sunpetal Grove, Temple of Abandon, Temple of Enlightenment, Temple of Epiphany, Temple of Malady, Temple of Mystery, Temple of Plenty, Temple of Silence, Temple of Triumph, Terramorphic Expanse, Twilight Mire, Vault of the Archangel, Windbrisk Heights, Woodland Cemetery, and Yavimaya Coast. Starting off the new lands with the first one that was revealed is Maelstrom of the Spirit Dragon. This land comes in untapped and can tap for a colorless mana without any conditions, or, conditionally, can tap for a mana of any color, but that mana can only be spent on casting a dragon spell or an omen, which is a new mechanic introduced in the set. But it has a third ability where for 4 mana, it taps and sacks to search your library for a dragon card and put it in your hand. This also gets a showcase print with the dragon border and different art. And then there's a cycle of monocolored checklands based around the clans. They all tap for one of their color, and curiously enter tapped unless you control a basic types of the two, like, enemy colors. But then they also all have a unique effect, so I will cover them all individually. But I suppose something else they do all have in common is they all have a borderless art. Starting with Quarry Mountain Monastery. This is the land for the Jeskai clan. It produces red mana and checks for a plains or island. Its unique effect is for 3 generic and a red. It taps to exile the top card of your library, but that card can be played from exile until the end of your next turn. Next up is Delcoven Encampment. This is the land for the Mardu clan. It produces white mana and checks for a swamp or a mountain. Its unique effect is for 2 generic and a white. It taps to make it so that every time you attack this turn, you create 2 1/1 red warrior creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, but they only last until the end of turn, which essentially is just the mobilize ability, but for the board instead of an individual creature. Then over in Azban, we have the Great Arashan City. This land produces black mana and checks for a forest or plains. Its unique effect is for a generic and a black. It taps to exile a creature card from your graveyard to create a 1/1 white spirit token creature. Moving on to the land of the Sultai, Kishla Village. This land produces green mana and checks for an island or swamp. Its unique effect is for 3 generic and a green. It taps to surveil 2. It's very straightforward. And the final new land of this set is Mistrise Village for the Temur clan. This land produces blue mana and checks for a mountain or forest, and its unique effect is for a single blue mana. It taps to make your next spell this turn uncounterable. There's not a lot of new lands in this set, only 6, but they're mostly pretty good. Personally, I feel that Quarry Mountain Monastery is the weakest of the bunch. Its mana cost, being effectively 5, is a bit much, and the randomness of exiling the top card of your library is pretty unreliable. Also, since that card has a time limit on it, really important combo pieces could get lost due to bad timing, or expensive spells could get lost due to being unable to pay for them yet. But despite these risks, suspending a card in exile and still being able to play it can protect it from things like hand destruction and bypass hand size limit. Additionally, there are situations that you just want to exile your cards for certain effects, or you just want to thin your library to find things more easily. It's definitely pretty decent, but its biggest problem is the randomness of it. And Greater Roshan City is kind of in the same boat of like exiling things, but it does it a little better. It exiles from the graveyard and is limited to creatures, but more importantly, you get to choose what you exile. Not only that, but it still makes a creature token as a bonus and costs 2 less mana than Quarry Mountain Monastery. The only real problem with it is getting things into the graveyard to begin with, but there's plenty of decks that have no issue with that whatsoever, and creatures that can be played from exile are kinda just super free in this situation. Next up is Delcoven Encampment, which, like I said earlier, is basically just a Mobilize 2 but for your board, and in the right deck can be very useful. It, unsurprisingly, goes really well with its clan, comboing with other Mardu cards from the set especially, making it a great card for drafting, and can help with other decks that like when your own tokens die. But unlike the previous two, this one doesn't really have a drawback, and its effect is pretty universally useful. Even if not especially powerful, it still never hurts. And the next one is also pretty universally useful. Kishla Village lets you repeatedly surveil too. It's a little costly, which does mean it's probably a bit slow for like high level competitive standard, but that's not really an issue in Commander when you have a lot more time and a lot more like ramp available. There's not really a whole lot else to say. It's very straightforward surveil too, but surveils are always useful and repeatable surveils are fairly uncommon. And as for the next card, it's also going to be really good for Commander. Maelstrom of the Spirit Dragon is an amazing dragon support card, making any color mana for dragons, or even tutoring one out, which is good in all formats, but is probably going to be a lot more prevalent in Commander. To be fair, drafting has a lot of dragons too, so this is a really good drafting card as well, and I'm sure there will be some dragons in Standard, but there isn't really before this set came out, so I don't see it being like super relevant. I'm sure it'll probably still see play. But the fact that it can make any color means it fits into multicolored dragon decks really well, and is especially useful in like, I don't know, maybe an Dragon deck? You know, like the second most widely used commander? As if it even needed more support? But that's not even the best land in the set, because there's still Mistrise Village. Mistrise Village can make a spell uncounterable for effectively 2 mana. That is an amazing cost to reward ratio, as opposed to like Quarry Mountain Monastery, which has an expensive cost for a mediocre effect. Mistrise Village has a super cheap cost for a great effect. This is definitely a meta level card, and there's no way this doesn't become widely used in virtually every blue deck, especially in like Simic or Commander, where Simic is like the most powerful color combo, because it can come in untapped, and there's going to be a much higher prevalence of counterspells in Commander, meaning that this good card gets even better in Commander. For Standard, this is like a 2 out of 5. It's getting a 2 mostly just for Mistrise Village, because that card is just so good, but the rest of the new like tribe lands are kind of just okay, and like the old tricolor tap lands being brought back up into Standard is not really doing anything. I guess Maelstrom of the Spirit Dragon is probably going to see Standard play, but overall, there's not too much affecting Standard in this set. Commander, on the other hand, is getting a 5 out of 5. This set is amazing for Commander. Mistrise Village and Kishla Village both get so much better in Commander, especially with the prevalence of Simic, because they both fit in Simic, and the other clan lands are like decent support for their niches, and Maelstrom of the Spirit Dragon is definitely going to be a permanent staple of Dragon decks. The theme, it's a solid 4 out of 5. This theme is so strong. The clan lands returning, the new clan lands, all the dragons in like the arts, but there's only around like half of the cards that actually have that stuff on them. Like, a lot of the life gains and the basics, and even just the regular special guests, kind of are just generic, so I can't give it full points. For art, this set is sitting at a nice 8 out of 10. This set has great art, new art on a lot of returning lands, lots of borderless arts, the amazing Dragon Eye basics, even a single showcase print. Although most of the new art on returning lands is just from a couple of cycles, which feels like a little cheap, and this set pretty much only has borderless arts for special prints, most of which are just the special guests, which also feels a little cheap. So there's not a ton of variety, and it loses a couple points there. Overall, this is a 19 out of 25. This set is pretty great for land. It definitely has a couple of flaws, and is getting hard carried by Mistrise Village and the special guest prints, but generally is pretty good. If you've made it this far in the video, please drop a like for turn, and subscribe for more land-filled content. If I missed anything, got anything wrong, or you just have questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next latest loadout when the Final Fantasy set comes out.